As we sit here on yet another Tisha B'Av, it behooves us to remind ourselves that the goal of this experience is not chas v'shalom to feel despair. Tisha B'Av is a day where we face the full catastrophe of Gullus, of our nation's sojourn throughout history and all around the globe, and all the horrific tragedies that we've endured, and how painful this journey has been, and we face it full on. And for the one time in the year, we allow ourselves to sense and to experience the full extent of what we're going through and what our parents went through and our grandparents and great-grandparents all the way back to Al Naris Bavel Sham Yashavnu, to the beginning of our exile. And while this day is incredibly painful, and we make reference to the distinction between the joy that we felt B'Tzeisim Mitzrayim and our exodus from Egypt, and we contrast that with B'Tzeisim Yerushalayim, and that lamentation and that pain that you and I are still experiencing that has only intensified in these last few years, Rachmana litzlan. We end that kinah with B'Shuvi Yerushalayim, with a reminder of the faith that we hold and have never let go of for a moment. That we hold on to the vision that B'Shuvi Yerushalayim, we will yet again return. We are yet again returning to the holy city, to the Yerushalayim, not just as a geological or geographical location, but the Yerushalayim in our consciousness, Yerushalayim, to a life lived with full awareness of the truth of the miracle that is nature, of the truth that is the wonder of our own souls, of the truth that is the value that each and every one of us represent, shining sparks of godliness, Yerushalayim. In Tisha B'Av we face the darkness, but we need to find a way to navigate out of it, through it, to find a way to hold on to that realization that this is a step in a longer process. This is one chapter in a much longer, larger narrative. And this is why Yirmiyahu Hanavi, writing Eicha, witnessing what he witnessed, foretelling what he foretold, finds it necessary to pause and to say, Zois Ashiv El Libi Al Kein Ayachel. He finds it necessary to stop amidst the intense thundering and lightning of the horrible concealment of Hashem's presence that was the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and the exile of the Am HaNivchar into the lands of the nations of the world. And Yirmiyahu pauses and he reflects. And he says, I'll never ever let go of hope. Because Chazdei Hashem ki lo samnu ki lo chalu rachamav. Hashem's mercy is eternal, it's forever. We never reach a point where we're outside the limits of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kindness and love. So it behooves us today to try to figure out some way to contextualize what we're going through as a nation in order to give ourselves the strength to be able to see it in a broader context, to reframe the story so that Chas v'Shalom Tisha B'Av does not cause us to despair, but on the contrary, it gives us an opportunity to deepen our connection with a vision of redemption, personally and collectively. And so in that vein, I'd like to present the following idea that comes from the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, who wrote an incredibly remarkable essay that's called Maimar HaKivoy, the exposition on Kivoy, which means hope. And the Ramchal says the most tremendous thing. That Tzaddik writes that the Mekubalim explain which is a concept that's becoming more and more familiar, Baruch Hashem, to Klal Yisrael as we become more exposed to the deeper teachings of our Torah. The idea of Hashem's first act of creation being an act of constriction or concealment of his presence to form what's called in the Sifrei Kabbalah, in the writings of the Arizal, a Chalal HaPanui, a vacant space with an infinite godliness, kiviyachol, so to speak. Obviously, this is not a physical space. We're speaking about a realm that's completely beyond our concept of space and time. But in some sense, as the Nefesh HaChaim explains in Shar Gimel, there was a concealment, there was a covering over of Hashem's presence that makes it seem as if there is a vacuum, a place within reality where God is not. And that's the first act of creation, is anti-creation, is tzimtzum, is concealment, is contraction, is withholding to create a void. A chalal hapanoi, a vacant space. The Mekubalim explain that the very next step that Hashem takes is the drawing down of a ray of godliness from the godliness that surrounds this vacant conceptual space, which represents the total, utter concealment of Hashem, even though Rabbi Nachman of Breslov is quick to remind us that, of course, there cannot be anything that does not have Hashem in it, present with it. Even Hashem's absence is itself a manifestation of Hashem's presence, but that's a paradox that we can't understand now. The Rebbe says we'll need to wait until Mashiach comes and we'll be able to understand that. But be that as it may, on a simple level, there's a void. And Hashem draws a ray down from the side of this vacant space to allow this ray to extend down into the vacant space, into the void. And that ray is referred to in Lashon HaKodesh as a kav. There is a kav of Elokus. There is a ray of godliness that is brought down into this space. And it's along that ray that all of the spiritual realms are created. From the letter Yud of Hashem's name to the Hey, from the Hey to the Vav, from the Vav to the Hey. In Kabbalistic terminology, this is the descent from the world of Atzilus to Bria, from Bria to Yetzirah, from Yetzirah to Asiya, which is our physical world, like an embryonic process where the cells begin to multiply, and as the months progress, the baby takes on more and more of a concretized form until he's ready to be born at 9 months. So all of creation goes through that process from pure, undefined spiritual energy to take on more and more and more defined form until we come down to our reality, which is called the Olam HaAsiya, which is at the very bottom of this ray. This is the Kav, the ray, which brings all of reality that we know and love and grapple with and sometimes struggle through into existence. So the Ramchal tells us an amazing thing. He says, although it's true that in Hebrew the word kav means ray, and that's how we're referring to it in this context, it's a ray of the divine, because it isn't a rushing in of all of the sides surrounding the chal hapanoi of pure godliness to collapse the void. That's not what's happening. The void maintains its structural integrity. What is happening is one single ray being drawn down into it. That ray is called in Hebrew a kav. Kav is ray. But the Holy Ramchal says that the word kav can be seen as connected to the word kivoi, which means hope. And the Mekubalim explain that the whole purpose of the Chalal HaPanoi, of the manifestation, so to speak, of this vacated space was only for the purpose to allow for there to be a cavity into which to draw this ray of light. To allow there to be godliness that's revealed specifically in a place where godliness is not. that brings about some kind of revelation of godliness, that even pure godliness as godliness, the infinite manifestation of of godliness in and of itself, cannot produce this special aspect that's referred to in the midrashic literature, in the Medrash Tanchuma, as a dira b'tachtonim, where Hashem wanted to manifest His presence in the lower realms, which means in realms of concealment, where it's a chiddush. It's also called a tosefes kishut. There's like something specially adorning. It's like a special piece of jewelry, a crown to the greatness of Hashem, that if Hashem manifests in the realm where God's presence is manifest, it's one thing, because that's what you'd expect godliness to do, is to be present. But that godliness could be present even within the vacancy of godliness. That a ray of the divine can burst forth and manifest within a realm of Hashem's concealment. That's a whole different thing. That's a dira b'tachtonim. That's creating for godliness a place even below, where I would think there's no way, there's no possibility for there to be any godliness found in the center of a vacated space where God has retracted Himself, and here we're in the dark, we're in the center of a void, of an abyss. And Hashem creates all of nature along this ray. He creates all of the hierarchical architecture of the entire Seder HaShtalshlus, this entire chain of emanation, of creation, to bring about this world right in the center point of this vacated space, in order to bring about this incredible new revelation that never could have quite come about before. It's a chiddush, it's a novelty. It gives something to godliness that godliness would be lacking otherwise, kiviyachol. So that Hashem has an opportunity to express the ultimate extent of the reach of godliness, that even in a place where you think godliness cannot manifest, even here, a ray of the divine can enter into this darkness and can bring forth a world that's bursting with light, bursting with vibrancy and vitality and growth and proliferation and blossoming and flourishing, buzzing with life, even here, even here, even here. So the Ramchal connects the word kav, which means this ray, to the word kivui, which means hope. And the Ramchal says that when a person goes through an experience in their own lives of chalal hapanoi, of a vacant space, where they sense that Hashem has so totally and completely concealed Himself that it is almost as if they feel that Hashem is absent from their lives, or absent from this cluster of circumstances, or this experience, this relational dynamic, whatever it is that they're going through, they feel that Hashem has forsaken them. Says the Ramchal, in that individual's life, they are experiencing a chalal hapanoi, a pre-creation stage of contraction, of concealment, of hester panim, of a vacant space, of void. Says the Ramchal, just like in the ontological creation of all of reality, the whole purpose of the chalal hapanoi was that so then there can be a ray of godliness that's drawn into it, to manifest Hashem's presence in a way that He otherwise would not have been able to manifest without there being a vacant space. That's the whole point of the chalal hapanoi. It's step one in a two-step process. There's the chalal that's created so that two realities could exist: a vacant space, and then step two, the possibility to reveal godliness in the vacant space. The tzaddik says it's the same thing within our own personal chalal hapanoi that we experience. We go through experiences where Hashem is absent, or we sense that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not present in our lives, because the natural impulse when we feel that is yush, is to despair. And to despair means that we are maintaining the structural integrity of the chalal hapanoi, shutting out all godliness to say, I'm all alone. There's no way that there's any way to reframe what I'm going through in any context of meaning. I feel beset by, overwhelmed by an experience of absurdity. Hevel havala makol havala. There's nothing I can do. There's no way anything can ever improve. The darkness will go on forever. That's the natural impulse. That's not a chiddush that a person should feel yush, triggered by staring into the void of the chalal hapanoi that all of us go through in our individual lives. But says the Ramchal, the same way that Hashem created that chalal hapanoi in order to be able to then draw down a kav, to draw down a ray of godliness, says the Ramchal, in our own chalal hapanoi that we experience, the whole avodah is to draw down a ray of kivui, to draw down a ray of hope. Hope, says the Ramchal, is the ray of godliness that penetrates the chalal hapanoi, that penetrates that vacant space. And in a certain sense, the same way that the whole reason the world was created was just so godliness could manifest as godliness that we experience throughout nature in our created world. The only reason we go through what we go through is to allow for the revelation of a uniquely beautiful, glorious, elevated, pristine, and potent layer, so to speak, of godly revelation that's called hope. That without going through the darkness of the chalal hapanoi in our own lives, we would never have been able to reveal this incredibly lofty manifestation of godliness in reality. There would never be an opportunity for that gilui, that revelation of godliness, to be revealed. It is specifically going through those experiences where our natural impulse is to despair. And nonetheless, we hold on to kav, we hold on to kivui, that there's a remarkable revelation of godliness that bursts forth onto the scene in our own personal lives. And while that's true for each of us individually, and the broken temple, the broken down churban beis hamikdash that each of us experience in so many different areas of our own lives, it is certainly true for our nation as a whole. It is specifically the chalal hapanoi of being devoid of the splendor of our nation, of the Beis Hamikdash, Ateres Rosheinu, the crown of our collective head. Having gone into Galus and endured and experienced what we've gone through and endured, that although the first exile was 70 years, we've been marching along for thousands of years. It is only because of this that we've had the ability to manifest this new R, which we mentioned in the beginning of this little talk, called Va'aval Pishi Yismamea Im Kol Zeh Achakaloi Bechol Yom Sheyavai. Like Yirmiyahu says, Chaz de Hashem ki lo yisavnu ki lo yichalu rachamav. We're still here. Not only are we still here, we're shining and thriving in ways that are just absolutely unimaginable for a ragtag group of emaciated Holocaust survivors stumbling out of gas chambers to rebuild what we rebuild. Coming back to Eretz Yisrael like we're coming back to Eretz Yisrael. Holding on despite everything to the kav, to the ray of hope, to the faith that the story is not over. That's the special glow of the journey from Galus to Geula. And that's what the Avodah of Tisha B'Av offers us. We sit on the floor and we say kinnis and we read Eicha and we reflect on all the pain of the world that's a direct result of the brokenness of the link between heaven and earth that was the Beis HaMikdash. And yet, when we sit there facing the Chalal HaPanui of the Kina referring to the Asara Harugei Malchus, and about how these 10 tzaddikim were tortured mercilessly in ways that we can't imagine. We read about the Holocaust. We read about the burning of wagon loads of the Gemara. We read about October 7th. We face the darkness. We face the Hevel Havalim HaKol Havel. And yet, we're able to get to the end of Koheles and say, Sof Davar Hakol Nishma. Although it may appear like we're at the end, Sof Davar, and there's no way that we can progress, and there's no chance that anything will ever change. As Elokim Yira. Hold on to the awareness that Hashem is part of our lives. Ve'es mitzvosav shemar. And hold on to his opportunities for connection called the mitzvahs. Ki zeh kol ha'adam. Because this is why we were created. This is the human condition that experiences so many pockets of godlessness for the purpose of bringing about that light of Yerushalayim, bringing about that Yerushalayim, the bringing about that consciousness that's called Das, that the Gemara in Bracha says, Kol mi sheyesh b'idea ki'ilu nivna beis hamikdash b'yamav. Anybody who holds on to that awareness, who doesn't give up hope, who doesn't sink so deeply into the darkness that we feel yush and that we stop holding on to that vision of B'shuva Yerushalayim, it's as if the Beis HaMikdash was built in that person's lifetime. That's the avodah of Tisha B'Av. To face the darkness and then to draw down the kav, the kivui. Mincha time, you get up from the floor, you sit on chairs, you have a little kumzitz, you try to be mechazik yourself. B'shuva Yerushalayim. Thank you, Hashem, for putting us into this Chalal HaPanui, that we have the privilege of drawing down that ray of this incredibly elevated level of godliness that would otherwise have never been able to be revealed. That's called kivui. That's called hope. That's called ein shum yeosh ba'olam klal. Hashem should bless us, that we should be able to experience Tisha B'Av the way that it's supposed to be experienced. To sit with the darkness and not try to minimize it. To recognize, oh, the void is vacant. That's a vacant void. That's painful as anything. And nobody's going to minimize that at all. And yet, within the void, in other words, maintaining the integrity of the void and not trying to answer it away and say everything's going to be okay, despite it all, to find the strength inside to hold on to hope despite all appearances of that being a futile endeavor. Facing every sof davar hakol nishma, facing every kind of dead end where it seems like there's nothing else, there's nowhere else to go. Take a deep breath and draw down the light of Yerushalayim. Eselikim Yira, to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash in our heart and in our mind. V'afal pi sheyisma mea im kol zeh achak aloi b'chol yoim sheyavoi chaz de Hashem. It's all the kindness of Hashem. Ki lo sabnu, ki lo chalu rachama. Thank you so much for listening. May we be privileged to spend next Tisha B'Av together with the third Beis HaMikdash as the yontif that it will become, together with all of Klal Yisrael and all of humanity. Ki beisi beis tefillah yikare chala.